Okay, hello everybody. I'm glad to see you again. Yesterday we started our public online program Artist is Absent Talks, and today we will continue to introduce you the participants of our program. Again with you, Lucy Nechai and Vartan Markaryan, the co-curators of the International Virtual Residency Program for Digital Artists, Artist is Absent. Let me remind what our program happened in cooperation between NVAIR Ukraine, Schafhof Germany, and KAIR Slovakia. Our program is taking place for the second time, and this time we have global competition, so we have the opportunity to communicate and co-create in a global cohort of artists. I wish everyone an interesting journey with us. And the first speaker will be Oksana Kryzhanivska. It was unusual to find you through the international open call. The artist who was born in Ukraine with a Ukrainian name, citizen of Canada, but application came from China. Welcome, Oksana. We not hear you on your microphone.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I do have some videos in my presentations today, so I hope that will somehow magically, the magic of the internet will start working in that time. So let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, well, first of all, hello everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today and talk about my work. In this talk, I will give you an overview of my art practice and my story. I named this talk Matter Plus Plus because my artistic medium drives my inquiry. Here, matter refers to the material, as in sculptural material, and plus plus as in the computer code. And in computer code, a plus plus is used as a notation for incrementing a value. So when looking at how my practice evolved in digital realm, I see myself expanding my understanding of materiality and sculptural medium. As an artist, I am a maker and an educator as well. I started to be interested in art pretty young, when I was still living in Ukraine. I was born in Lutsk in Volynska Oblast and attended a pretty traditional art school at the time. But I also started to play around with digital painting and some technology apps at the same time. When my parents were about my current age, they decided to pursue their American dream. And that way, in 2002, I ended up in Canada. Since then, I continued pursuing a different kind of art education, more with a Western philosophy. And so I did my BFA and my MFA in sculpture. And since then, there are many more digital art programs right now, but at that time it was kind of sparse anyway. Still, I have seen many instructors at that time playing around with CNC machines. So when I chose my MFA program at the time, it was for the shared digital machinery and facilities with the architecture department. So I began my journey to become an interdisciplinary artist, as you can see in this graphic that I made, combining my traditional art background in making things and expanding it to interaction design and learning computer programming. And this is kind of where I position myself right now. As you can see, this triangle and the little dot is where I hope to be maybe in a couple of years. After my MFA, I actually started my PhD in computational media and design program, where I was one of the only two artists, and I was surrounded by musicians, architects, and computer scientists. And in this interdisciplinary environment, I was able to expand what artistic inquiry can mean for me. And just before the pandemic started, I moved to a small city in China, not too far from Shenzhen, which is the big technology center. So that was attractive to me. And since then, I work on establishing my art practice in a new country with a completely unfamiliar language. And as you can see here, there is an example of where I started as an artist. It's pretty familiar, kind of traditional work. So I started as a sculptor, focusing on casting, stone carving, metal work. I actually really liked the weight and sensation of sculptural materials at the time. However, the audience is usually deprived of this experience. So in my next works, I was exploring different ways to make my audience handle and touch my sculptures and perceive them more with their body rather than in semantic analysis. I gained interest in human body through my casting process, where I cast and altered different body parts into new forms. And much of my work was inspired by an idea of embodied thinking. So I include this quote by Mark Johnson, which says, "The mind is inherently embodied. Thought is mostly unconscious. Abstract concepts are largely metaphorical." So these themes, they continue uh, showing up in my work in different ways. And I started exploring machine perception and contrasting them to human perception when I was using 3D scanning and casting my own body parts in its sections. So in this work, it's called Formula. I scanned my breasts and reshaped them to have 1, 2, and 3 nipples. And the title here hints at the tension between the artificial and natural reproduction of the humans. And with these breasts, they were CNC machined. There were 9 of them in total, and I cast them in milk-scented wax, so the participants also have an olfactory experience. And I like these because the cast preserved the topographic marks of the machine and the kind of artifacts of the materials of at different stages. At this point, I was interested in the ideas of posthumanism, female body as a cyborg, and simulacra. And with these kind of themes, when I'm working digitally and cooperating with the software, I can't help but think about the new materiality that emerges from this new media. So when I'm thinking about that, I like referring to Manuel de Holanda, who kind of summarized a lot of these concepts. And he states, "We can now conceptualize an active matter endowed with its own tendencies and capacities, engaged in its own divergent, open-ended evolution, animated from within by immanent patterns of being and becoming." So since then, when I was thinking about embodied perceptions and sculptural work, I started learning how to code. So I was able to include interactive experiences in my sculptural works. And the audience was encouraged to touch these objects and sense the material and a vibrational response within the material. So I programmed the electronics inside to simulate different vibrational outputs, so kind of like breathing or heartbeat, different pulses. And the participants touched the embedded nipples in the sculpture. Um, and this also expanded the way I use materials when I included these kind of flexible flesh-like silicones. So I muted this, but you can sort of hear the vibration in this work when they're touching. And my fabrication methods changed as well at this point. So I started thinking about designing different kinds of surfaces that would be touchable, and participants would be able to glide their hands or poke or squeeze these sculptural forms. For this, I was using digital modeling and sculpting tools. I also built my own 3D printer to quickly prototype some of these shapes, because it's very difficult to see what you're actually doing on the screen. And then I used a very detailed resin printer to produce the final tactile shapes that I later cast to embed with the wires and the motors and connect the electronics to that. So this slide kind of shows that entire cycle with the different stages. And after this work, I was kind of interested in the idea of a bottom-up design where you take different components and put them together. So I created this thing called disturbed system, and it's a touch organ. So I was interested in seeing what new sculptural form can emerge when I combine metaphors of organs, human touch, composite materials, and computer code. And I created this organ from these parts. For this work, I actually collaborated with a sonic artist and a computer engineer to connect the sensors and the vibrations with the sound generative software. And together we actually designed an artificial speech for this object that sounded sort of like English, but it didn't use any real English words. And I'm going to play a 1-minute video of this. So I hope you can hear the sound. So when I was designing, not go again, there we go. When I was designing this series of works, I was interested in how these forms can generate meaning and form rather than an artist predetermines the meaning and tries to communicate it. So this changed my entire approach, and I call it kind of a material system. So here, silicone, electronics, digital topologies, human interactions, they're all kind of equal and equally important to create the final object. And when creating the human interactions and observing them, I strive to achieve a state of presence in participants. I keep thinking about the Deleuzian concept of virtual and how this presence manifests in the interactive works. I also am interested in intersecting this concept with the virtual, with the VR as we know it, the technology. So where the space beyond the screen becomes a tangent space, and this is something that cannot be really captured, but can be experienced. And I like this quote by Brian Masumi he says, for the present is lost when the missing half second, passing too quickly to be perceived, too quickly actually to have happened. This requires a reworking of how we think about the body. Something that happens too quickly to have happened actually is virtual. The body is as immediately virtual as it is actual. So when I was thinking about these things and I started working with computer code, I didn't have the resources that we can currently have for the current budget to create complicated virtual worlds. I started out with processing and coding simple systems that can collaborate in real time with the human, with the human participant. So I programmed these kind of autonomous systems with in 3D. They're called agent-based systems. So every little particle that you see on a screen has its own behavior. And I used some computer vision algorithm to take a part of the sky above Calgary to capture constellations. And when humans were coming into a view of a web camera and they were moving, these little participants, they were reacting and forming different 3D shapes and formations. Then I kind of was moving more and more into the digital part of my work. And I was able to expand to more visual interesting media using 3D modeling and animation. And I was also exploring how one can experience sculptural forms in the time without having material objects. Uh, in this work, I built a web page with interactive 3D environment and layered it with sound. And I just want to play a little video for you. So here, the camera movements are controlled by the user interactions. So you can view it as you wish. This doesn't create the sound, but I made the sound in a different software and layered it. Okay, so so in this slide, I'm showing another work that I have done in actual VR experience. So I continued exploring different tools and software and started working with Unreal Engine and built this for Oculus Touch kit. So before the Oculus was completely overtaken by Facebook for their older model. And I was actually thinking about the topologies of those fabricated sculptures that are produced in the years prior. And I wanted to kind of give that feeling of experiencing the body as a landscape and how to see how these forms can translate into monumental scale, because that's possible with VR. And here the participants had to drag themselves around the 3D world, and they could touch the breasts, ears, and skin folds until they got sucked into an ear and placed into the world of flesh and fibers. And this experience ended up very physical because of the arm motions they had to use. The final goal of this experience was to walk over the different fibers of the flesh and experience a short free fall, then death, and then being reborn and start over. So I'm going to play this one. So in this clip, the camera movements were controlled by the head, human head looking in VR. And currently, I'm working on other ways of presenting my sculptural work, and I'm building an AR geolocation app, again using Unreal. So far, I have built 4 sculptures, and each has a unique interactive experience. So for example, this object, the flower-like object you're seeing here, it's a metaphor for our mother, and it is connected to the user through an umbilical cord that follows them around wherever they go. And in this work, I'm thinking about the meaning of places and how one forms attachments to these places, relationships, and memories with the aid of mobile phones because they are ubiquitous right now. And that's it for my presentation today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your attention.
Thank you, dear. I see questions from Vitaly.
Yes, I'm looking at the chat right now. Uh, what does this hand material means? Burnt skin. I think I was thinking when I was making this, I was thinking about raw flesh and kind of also giving a metaphor of flesh in these gloves in the VR. I think that's what you're meaning. And I was also experimenting with the whole idea of a cyborg uh, as, you know, it's supposed to be something that's a little creepy and scary.
Thank you. Oksana, I want to ask you my traditional questions because it's very interesting for me. It's about institution and about some infrastructure for digital art in art space in maybe in China. I think it's more close to you, or if you have a different opinion about what how it happened in Canada and how it now in China. Um, are you feel what now maybe few last year digital art and some art institutions start more openly to the digital art, and digital art had some infrastructure to be presented as a art in the same level as a traditional art.
Well, I can say from 2 different perspectives. So the first perspective is me as an instructor at the university. All of our students who are studying art are not studying anything they make. And there are very few classes where they have to make something by hand or paint. Most of the things they're studying are on a computer. But if I'm talking as an artist, as a practicing artist who's trying to show work, every time I come to talk to the galleries, um, they all ask me to either produce or 3D print my work, so there is something physical in the space. So it has been a little bit of a challenge so far. I'm also here quite new. So that's kind of the China perspective. And in Canada, it also depends because I feel like when I was um, starting out in this digital field, the field was quite small. I feel like after the pandemic that may be changing, but I've been here. So I don't really have a really good grasp on what's going on there. I also have a sense that these digital platforms kind of popped up during the pandemic temporarily, but I don't know how much interest there will be to support them beyond this time, because most of the institutions are actually in trouble. If you're looking at North American institutions, Canadian institutions, they're losing funding over time. Even though that some government funding exists, and Canada has a pretty decent government funding for artists, and they're actually open to support digital artists, um, the funding was dwindling over the time. So we are not in the best position, but hopefully these things can be reversed.
Thank you. It's my question because I'm had experience 12 years. It's educational my career in some art institutions and institutes and academies, and I understand what now it's 2 years all maybe. Some university art academies start to open the courses for digital art, yes, but it's only because they understand what is a good business, because the art scene don't ready to don't ready to show and represented of digital art. It's a very rarely point in each country, maybe some very great professional techniques and curators who understand what is digital art. And I think it's one of the big challenge for digital now, for digital art now. And I hope with what the same and same program as now we take part, yes, we have opportunity to influence for this challenge. It's only one for today. I understand what we must to talk about this, make the good promotion and show about show about digital art, many content, yes, and after we can to influence for it.
It's the question to me or to Lucy?
It's a question to Oksana.
Okay.
I can repeat because it's interesting for me if we can define this idea or concept of weird object, and often it's another element of this conflict with institutions, because they like not very interested in something too weird. And can we describe what means weird object in contemporary arts, and how you construct this visuality? Because I think objects that we have seen, they are like very weird, and I like them a lot.
Thank you. I think I'm kind of a crazy person, because when I was going through my school, I didn't care for my grades. And when I was going for my art school, when I was applying for my art school, I didn't care if I'm going to make money. And when I'm making art right now, I don't care if it's going to sell. So I do have to find other ways to support my, computers and gadgets that I need to use for these things. But I think the ideas that come into these objects, they go through that story that I showed you in my presentation. So I started out thinking about the body and kind of like what is having a human body in art right now, because in contemporary art, a human body is not really, figurative art is not something favored right now, but also making figurative art is very boring, right? It's very difficult to make it interesting. So for me, it was interesting to work with the body and body sensations and rethink what a body means in this digital context. So, idea of a monstrous body, idea of a cyborg, all of these things, they do feed into my work. And I think that's kind of an aesthetic that I work with.
Thank you, Oksana. I hope you stay with us, and we had the maybe 1 hour the good introductions and presentation, and please take part in a discussion. Thank you. I'm very glad to meet you, and it's very excited me to find you in our open call. It's cool. Thank you. Next speaker will be Vitaly. Vitaly Yankovy from Ukraine.
Hello.
Here. Yes, hello.
Maybe start with sharing my screen.
Yes.
So can you hear me well?
Yes.
My name is Vitaly. I'm a visual artist and designer and researcher of digital culture. I'm currently based in Vinnycia in Ukraine, and I'm on this way to move to other city, and maybe last few years I had an opportunity to work online distantly with some digital and media art, and maybe I will show you some works from online residencies. And I must say that I don't have some formal artistic education, and my education is my education came from a different artist-run educational initiatives, and also I consider residencies as some kind of educational thing. And I have a small experience of being a lecturer. And maybe I start from some theory I'm interested in, and in that case, maybe I won't be original. And for now, I'm interested in subjective data visualization, and also I read materials from Lev Manovich, who is a founder of a studio that works with big data visualizations. And in one of his books, he describes artistic data visualization as extremely subjective, and it's a way of creation where the artists try to avoid this unification and create something original, but working with some data. And also I am reading right now a very old school media theorist, Marshall McLuhan, his understanding of media, and it's also interesting in terms of transition from pre-digital culture to digital culture, and Marshall McLuhan is some kind of a visionary predictor. And also I study this wave of dark philosophies, some theories around Graham Harman and his object-oriented ontology. And I like this idea of avoiding fact-checking, and that this type of thinking allows to use emotions, some fantasies, dreams, together with facts and some shots of reality. And I use this approach in my own artistic practice. And I will start I will start from a work for online residency, landscape as a monument. It's from 2020. And during that residency, it was international, and we had lectures from Tim Ingold, a theorist of a landscape, and we had practices, like walking practices inside of the landscape. And in this work, I tried to make a visualization of a footprint that I made using tracking soft Strava. And I use some data from a software and some emotions like interest and wondering to build this transition footprint. And this walk in the landscape is an entrance to the woods. It's some kind of borderline between urban space and natural space, and this entrance to the forest situated in Irpin. It's a satellite city near Kiev, and it's a place when you can clearly see how a type of landscape changes. And I will show you how it looks as a visualization of this digital footprint as some kind of a weird object. And so here is the website of another online residency, which is called Anabasis. And so the setting of the residency was connected with Paul Celan and post-humanism. And though Paul Celan was born in Chernivtsi in Ukraine, and he's considered as one of the iconic poets after Holocaust. And in this work for the residency, I also tried to work with this digital data's visualization, and most time we look for some memory places using Google Maps and put in some geotags, and I try to make a visualization of this geotag using some data from software and like distance to nearest 4G spots, like a time, and it's maybe more important for me using this mix of emotions that we feel being next to memory places. And so this object exists like AR map.
The proximity,
and
after all, this itself a paradoxical act of profanation of profound.
This visualized geotag and put it into a completely different context, to the context of city cafes. And for me, it's some kind of metaphor how memory can be easily transformed into something connected with consumption, and it's very easy to lose this emotion of grieving and loss and turn to something more fun. And for me, it's very interesting how digital object work in the context of this consumption culture, because for example, AR works can be easily transformed into something fun, into a toy. And in this video work, I try to somehow think about this attraction in digital media.
To my question,
and also I have started my practices with text writing. So I often write texts, voiceovers for videos. They are extremely boring, and for me, it's some kind of hypercompensation for not writing texts, not writing some critics, and not writing some academic texts. I can do it.
question what had happened during the Holocaust in the city I live. The administrator of a private Holocaust museum in Odessa said.
So the first location is a Jewish cemetery in Kryzhanivska, and a building which you see is now renovated into a new memory museum. And I place this geotech in transition space where you can pass by or where you can enter, but you have this choice to ignore memory place. And also this object exists as itself, and we allow people to interact with it. Maybe some people who don't know the context of its creation may consider it as like just some strange thing which you can also watch as an Instagram filter and put it into a completely different context. And the last work from last year I want to share, it's also from online, offline residency, Budapest hotel, and it's a residency that works with some direct place with a hotel which was built by Hungarians in the 1940s, and which is now called like Edelweiss Resort Camp, and it's a hotel in Yasenia in Transcarpathia in Ukraine. And we had materials from historical research, and I worked with these materials directly, and it was interesting for me that this building, which is now looks like this. So it didn't. It still keeps its basic construction, but with some elements that appeared in Soviet time and then in time of independent Ukraine. And for me, this hotel is some kind of a hyper object by itself, and I defined the three periods which it represents. It's Hungarian period, because it was built as a resort for Hungarian militaries. Then Soviet time, where he was used as a tourist spot, because this small village situated near Dragobrat is like very famous ski resort in Transcarpathia. And also it in 90s and in 2000 it functions like ordinary Ukrainian hotel. And for this residency, I also made a video where I tried to combine these three periods of an object into one object. For example, this this one consists of authentic column, which was built by Hungarians. This one is a billiard table, which was brought there maybe in 90s, and some old fashioned mountain ski, which connects with this Soviet period. And for this object, I write fiction stories and combine it into some manipulative narrative, and we can consider this objects like type of hybrid museology or something. And also Transcarpathia is a very weird place in a question of some local stories, and people tell you completely different information about some facts. And maybe in this text part in voiceover, texts combine these fictions with facts, and you don't know exactly where is truth and where is fake.
На будівництві він познайомився з місцевим будівельником Миколою. Вони потоваришували і часто разом їздили кататись на лижах в гори. Обоє вони в 1958-му потрапили в лавину під Говерлою, де вижив тільки Іштван. Коли в готелі в наш час встановили більярдний стіл, сини Миколи та Іштвана іноді заходили туди, то відновив цей ритуал трохи в іншій формі. На День лісника єгері заселялись до турбази Едельвейс на кілька днів і вечором намагались закинути намисто з бубликів на шпиль старого куполу над терасою. Кілька разів
So in the next part, I want to share some things that I call like laboratory works. So they are not released now, but maybe it will be interesting for someone to look at this like a vector of thinking, because so I don't have to make money from my artistic practice, and I have opportunity to experiment and to follow this interest of a researcher, and to experiment. And so the first type of such laboratory work is also a video, where I try to visualize this Bluetooth connection between wireless devices, and put them in a setting which have some connection with Edouard Manet painting Picnic on the Grass, which was very provocative. At time it was created, and it was made like in very wrong manner, with wrong proportions, wrong lighting, and it was rejected any time. And it's interesting to use digital modeling to play with this lighting and proportions. And in this work, I put these wireless objects with which more form than a function to some very human setting of this relaxing on the grass. And as a voiceover, I use direct text from Apple Corporation commercial video from a time when they released first AirPods, and where they speak about this wireless future.
We are just at the beginning of a truly wireless future we've been working towards for many years, where technology enables the seamless and automatic connection between you and your devices.
And I also think about these devices as some kind of object that people can decorate, and they can exist like something that can decorate itself, as in video devices reproduce this very human activity, and this need of decorate yourself is something very human, and it looks weird when we implement this practice into something that has different logic. And also another type of experiments, I am still interested in static image, because I studied photography many years ago, and I think it's interesting to work with staged photography, but using some digital software and digital renderings, and you can save a lot of money for decoration and for techniques that you need for such practices. And I also tried to implement this like a dark, weird object, some alien object into a general build, and it's something that represents this digital activity, digital footprints that we have to coexist with, and maybe the main emotion that drives this type of visuals is some kind of a digital tiredness or digital intoxication, and I am interested how at one hand, like being inside of this digital world give us a lot of opportunities, and at the other hand, it can make us very depressed and distracted, and it's a like very complicated mix of emotions. And also I experiment with such type of objects, and also I watch that site Цветник online, and I try also to create some builds which make some distance between form and function, and can exist like an object itself. So I have some time, hope, and maybe a few last ones. This also from the studio experiments. I'm also interested how physical actions, physical exercises goes together with being inside of this digital work, like distance work in digital economy, like using social media, and to have energy for it. So you have to make some physical exercises, and so in this build I put this image of a girl who makes physical exercises directly into a piece of a software, into a chip, and so I'm a great fan of Soviet plastic sculpture, and I collect some stuff, and also this girl looks not like a real human, more like a porcelain figure, and I remember how Jeff Koons used Soviet ballerine figure by Oksana to create his object, and but also I try to understand how to work with this medium of digital sculpture, and it also can move, and the sound of the work is a music box, and you have this mechanics of like making it move. You have rotate something to hear sound, and it something similar that you have make these exercises to have some energy for digital work, and so as you see, I don't have like one straight vector in my work, and I get used to it, to this jumping from one thing to another, and that's why I don't have some successful career, but actually maybe I'm just not interested in it, and I'm more interested in this being inside of some process of understanding, and it's maybe more important for me to get how it works. I mean, this digital culture, then make some product of it, or make some like quality self-representation of something.
Okay, thank you, Vitaly. You want to share something else?
Yes, if I have the time, I will.
No,
maybe.
very little time. 2 minutes.
Okay. And also, okay, maybe I will finish. So it's.
Oh, if you have 2 minutes, you can show us, and we must move to the next speakers.
Okay, so maybe as the last piece, I will show you a work I'm currently working on, and so for me, creating these digital works is always some kind of a struggle with the software, and but also I'm interested in some narrative works, but they are extremely hard to produce. And so this is a demo version of some narrative work I'm making right now. It's about some borders, passing borders, digital identities, but it's also like the first episode. And maybe the last thing I want to say is that maybe during the residency, I'm interested to work with some experience things. I mean, experience of being inside of some kind of digital landscape or inside Mozilla hubs. And so I have very poor technical skills, and maybe I'm not able to produce this experience by myself, and maybe so we can like do it together. And so this one is a demo version of okay, that's all for now. If you have some questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for watching.
No, nobody have a question? Because I have.
I also
Okay.
have a question.
Okay. Oksana?
Yes, Vitaly, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into art? It looks like you were exploring this pretty recently. What made you do this?
Actually, it's not recently. It's was maybe like 10 years ago. I just tried to drop it many times, and for now I just try to like follow my nature and just take it as it comes. And I think it's maybe some some mix of situations that opened me some, I don't know, cultures that I can be in, and which suits me.
Okay.
But I tried to drop any artistic practices maybe many times, but I didn't manage to do it, so I'm still in.
Okay. Somebody else? Okay, Vitaly, I want to ask you about your ideas of your work. You show us the project about it was project. I don't remember how named the residency where you work with posthumanism ideas. And what do you think about challenges for humanity now, and how art can help in these challenges?
Actually, it's a very complicated question, because I think that posthumanism is a rather theoretical idea, and in this case, visual arts can produce some visualization of different scenarios. And also in pop culture, we have a bunch of classic situations of posthumanism with this world without any human. And maybe I stand more for some kind of a hybrid reality, and some clean posthumanism maybe is for me is like a theory, and it's interesting to work with this idea and maybe to manipulate with it. And as I understand, the idea of posthumanism is still in development, and so there are many theorists like Francesca Ferrando who gave some lectures during the residency, and so it's like a way of thinking, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like this dark philosophies, it's the way of thinking. And
okay, maybe from Florian, you have one question. What is hybrid humanity?
So hybrid humanity, I actually said like hybrid reality, but okay, so it's a world where physical object like I don't know, like nature, like bodies, combine with engineered objects like architecture, like hardware, and combined with digital objects like software, like all these emojis, digital footprints, and also there is also this metaphysical aspects connected with some ghosts, mysticism, and they are together form this hybrid reality which we work with. And so as for some theory, I consider myself as a reader, not as a theorist. And so there are people who work in academic sphere, and they try to describe this extremely complicated relations between objects, matters of different nature.
Okay, thank you, Vitaly. Thank you, and I really hope what with residency help you to find that something new tools, yes, and maybe new ideas to your work. I want to introduce the next speakers, Eric Millikin. He text what he feel themselves as a keyboard, and I want to ask what is mean, and maybe Eric now to explain all us through the him art practice. Welcome, Eric.
Yes, thank you. Let's do this. Before I start to share my screen, I just want to say thanks everyone for being here. Thank you for having me here. I'm Eric Millikin. I'm a new media artist based in the United States. I work in AI, AR, VR, bio art, social activism. I often explore the role of fear in our cultures and societies, among many other things. And today I'm going to do a couple things. I'll show you some of my latest work in progress. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'll quickly show you some of my work from like the past 2 to 3 years that sort of led me to where I am today. And then I'll tell you a little bit about what I might do next, which is doing this residency. So let me get my screen share going here. And I cannot see anyone, so I'm going to show you all so I can see your faces. Yes, I am Eric Millikin, and today I'm here to talk to you about maps, masks, monsters, and microbes, among probably many other things. I'm going to kick this off with this picture here, this is one of my most recent AI generated portraits in a new series that I'm working on. What I've been doing is I've been training an AI on portraits of decolonial leaders that includes Nobel Peace Laureates, also training the AI on colonial wartime maps, as well as microscopic biological organisms. And to give you a sense of sort of the range that I'm getting with this new custom AI code that I'm working on, I'll show you a few more of these. Here I'm getting on the left, getting some nice deep rivers. Part of the idea here is to try to sort of reimagine what the shapes of our world might look like if it were redesigned for this new AI generated, more peaceful humanity, hopefully. On the right, some nice green microbes. These right now, these are sort of in the prototype sketch stage. They're all currently still images, but they're probably intended to be part of an AI animated video of some sort. I'll talk more about that later and show you some other things. Here's some nice ghostly islands on the left. And part of the using AI here with sort of this facial recognition, which sort of creates new faces. Part of the idea there is to sort of hack up what could be military grade facial recognition technology, and instead of using it to try to target drones or something, to try to use it to create visual art. I'll run through a couple more of these. One thing, just a technical thing that I've been working on with this series is try to get an extremely high level of detail so that I can make these into 8K videos or large format prints or something like that. And so here's sort of a sense of the level of detail that I'm getting with these. And then as large format prints, they might turn into large format prints, which work in augmented reality. But yeah, this is me right there in the middle, right underneath that play button. I'll tell you a little bit more about me. I'm currently in Richmond, Virginia, in the United States, which is the former capital of the Confederate States of America during the American Civil War. That was the capital of the losing pro-slavery side of that war, right? So what I'm about to show you here is part of this really short excerpt from Electronic Exorcism which was an augmented reality performance video of mine from late 2019, where I'm using augmented reality as a form of exorcism to exorcise the demons haunting these Confederate monuments that haunted our city. They were throughout the city and on the street where I live. So let me hit play on this. And maybe the main thing that I want you to get there is that I was using AI to make these strange AI generated masks. And this was all pre-COVID, but I was already like heavily into masks and ritual masks and things like that, which was sort of a little bit of a premonition. I moved from Detroit. I'd been based in Detroit for years before I moved to Richmond, Virginia. I moved to Richmond to get my MFA at Virginia Commonwealth University School of the Arts. I was in VCU's Kinetic Imaging program, which is our emerging and experimental media art program. And then this year I just started as an adjunct instructor at VCU Arts, where I've taught things like augmented reality and 3D computer art. This is taking you way back, kind of way back. This was the first project I did when I arrived in Richmond. So this is fall 2019. It started as a single channel AI generated anti-racist horror film that I called The Birth of a Vampire Nation. And that's largely what you see projected on the wall. It was created by an AI trained on early 20th century films, particularly racist films. Pretty much anything from the early 20th century is a racist film. Microscopic images of human red blood cells, telescopic images of distant stars, and then I composed a score from human heartbeats and radio waves from space. And then I turned that into this video projection and VR installation that you see here. And I'm actually going to cheat and pause this for a moment. I'm going to point out that it's projection mapped so that the video sort of intentionally hits the viewer's body here. So they're a viewer of a VR experience, but then they also turn into a projection screen. So there's something to be viewed by other people. And then the projection mapping also captures their shadow in such a way, and so that rather than getting a typical black shadow back here, you get this red shadow made out of red blood cells. I'll cheat and pause this again. This is a 3D sculpted and 3D printed bioplastic vampire mask that they had to wear in order to watch the VR experience. And so again, they sort of had to become a performer while they watched something else. This is excerpt from the sort of main projected video, sort of exploration of fear, how it's used in mass media sort of throughout history, and how little has changed in 100 years. And then this is the VR experience. In here, you're following a vampire through this space. If you ever turn around, you see that you're also being followed by another vampire. And if you look down, you see that you yourself, your body is the vampire body. So there's this sort of who's following who, what role do we each play in this? And then this is a alternate installation of it that was in a big 360 screen. I'm not sure why somebody's shaking their finger at somebody, but I appreciate that energy there, whatever that was. And again, this was all before COVID, and I was doing these projects where people had to wear the ritual mask in order to experience new things. Let's see if I can get to that slide. Now this is Vironomicon. It was a new media artist book that I made in spring 2020, as soon as the pandemic started. And this was in part to, while we were all moving to online and virtual experiences, to actually sort of as a work of mail art to send out a physical object that was created with digital technology. So here's some of that book. It included things like this. These are cut up incantation poems that were assisted by an AI trained on writings that were either about or during historic plagues and pandemics. And so this here is a part of a Nostradamus prophecy about a plague here. This is from the yellow is William Shakespeare writing during a plague. And here's Edgar Allan Poe's Masque of the Red Death there, and more. And then there were also these AI generated magic circles, sort of magic circles of protection or summoning that were all based on spell books from medieval and Renaissance plague times. And then they were accompanied by these sort of reimagined viruses, sort of re-engineered viruses, sort of predictive AI to perhaps predict future mutant variants and or possible vaccines or something. And again, this is very early in the pandemic. And then these are QR code tarot cards created by AI trained on skulls from Memento Mori and still life paintings that unlock these sound experiences. And each of those cards led to a different sound project, but they all harmonized with each other. So when people got together with them, they created this chorus. Then this is premonition programming, and this was maybe the first gallery installation that I did sort of as things opened up, sort of fall, it says right there, fall 2020. But as spaces started to open up, and it was a weird time because spaces were starting to become available, but a lot of things couldn't happen in them. And so I was actually able to get into some spaces that I wouldn't normally have been able to get into. This is a 2-room sound and video installation. One room includes this animated video projection on a bio-art sculpture that's grown from mushrooms and mycelium. And it's sort of chants these incantations that were created from converting AI generated images into electronic music. The form of that sculptural mask is based on robots from early 20th century mad scientist films. And then the other room included video projections with augmented reality masks. That's the first room. Here we go to the second. And there's these performances where with augmented reality masks, and those masks are designed by AI trained on monsters from America's top grossing and most critically acclaimed horror films. And then the projection alternately hides and reveals the presence of viewers' shadows. And then the video projections in both rooms were created with AI trained on endangered species, Venus flytraps, monarch butterflies, human nerve cells, computer circuitry, forest fires, and then finally COVID-19 contaminated blood samples. And this will give you a sort of a good look at the sculpture grown from mushrooms. everything on the left is like the roots of mushrooms, and everything on the right that you see here is sort of the fruit of mushrooms, the things that you typically eat. And so this is my somnambulistic autonomous land roving enlightenment machine. I'll point out that you probably, in case you didn't catch it, this SALEM spells Salem. And now is probably a good time to tell you that I am descended from women who were executed as witches during the Salem witch trials back in 1692 in American history. And in this project, I've got this robotic rover that uses machine vision to sort of move about the space. Its movements are based on its sort of reading these documents that are on the floor. There are two types of documents on the floor. Those are court documents from the Salem witch trials, and sort of scripts for performances for the lords and ladies of English royal court to perform. So two very different types of court documents that the robotic rover is viewing. And while it makes its way through and across those documents, making little decisions based on how they look, it laser projects this animated looping video that's created by an AI that was trained on the handwriting of those texts, as well as sort of common themes of those two types of court papers, including birds, clockwork. So yeah, and then the points when the robot turns around and shines a spotlight on you, that's when it's like projecting right on you. It sort of chases you about the room a little bit. Oops. This is Reanimator Reflection. This was my MFA thesis exhibition from last spring. There is audio here and there is captions here, so I'll maybe kind of keep my mouth shut a little bit on this one, but I say that and then I'm about to talk right over it. One thing I'll draw your attention to is that in this exhibition, the whole design of the exhibition was as a mirror, that it was right in the entrance of this gallery, which was a multi-floor gallery, multi-space gallery. And so you had to go through, before you saw anything in this building, you had to go through this. And then when you left the building, you'd have to go through it again in reverse, right? So it was sort of a mirror as you entered and as you exited. And then everything in it was sort of constructed as a mirror. There are video projections reflected off a mirror. This AI generated symbol here is this mirrored kaleidoscopic object. And this is another 2-room installation. And this is in this room, and in the other room, there's sort of a Rorschach test video that reflected off the floor. All of these mirrors and reflections were set up because the text that I was working with here was early 20th century writing from horror and science fiction writer H.P. Lovecraft, that very much mirror our current time. They were written and read during that early 20th century influenza pandemic from like 1918, and in the US, it's what was known as Red Summer in 1919, which was a lot of racist attacks. And so it was somewhat drawing this connection between pandemics, racial scapegoating and attacks that we were experiencing here in the US, and how they sort of mirror the experiences of 100 years prior. And then this laser projection ends up sweeping all the way across 2 different rooms and meeting up with this other projection. Then this is, I'll give you just a little taste of this. This is Charybdis 3, which has a kind of a noisy waterfall in it, which I'm trying to turn down. It's an infinitely spiraling AI generated video created by AI trained on endangered species threatened by climate change, and then projected onto a waterfall near those species' natural habitats. So right now we're going deep inside the eye of this endangered frog, looking for another endangered species as we go deeper. The series is named after Charybdis, which is the whirlpool creating creature from Greek mythology. This was from mid-November last year. So we find this bat in there. And then when we look deeper into this eye of this bird, we'll find something else. And in total, there were, it was a 9-minute and 45-second loop, 9-minute and 40-second loop, excuse me, that I think there were 13 different endangered species, both plant and animal species in it. Yeah, so I want to show two more things quickly, then we'll kind of go back to where we started. But I want to get back to AI generated portraits. This was from a work in progress AI generated 3D modeling project from last spring, where I was again thinking about masks as usual, as I often do, before and during this pandemic. But I trained an AI on multiple masked monsters from American horror films. And like Jason, for example, from the Friday the 13th films, if you can picture him. And one of the things that I was picking up on these, all these masked monsters, there were a number of things, but among them, that they were all white men. They were all wearing even whiter masks. So there was this weird white, even whiter transformation happening. And then they're also weirdly rural always, you know, it was always the city kids going out into the woods. And they're also oddly blue collar as well, which is weird. Like this blue would show up all the time. I'm like, where is that coming from? Well, they were wearing these blue coveralls all the time. And they also ended up being sort of this fractal where the faces are made up of even more melty mutant faces. This was almost in a show last spring. It was supposed to be in late spring, but then the show got moved up to early spring, and so I had to do something that I could do faster than this. So this is still out there as a thing that I'm like constantly thinking about. And then this is actually I think the earliest thing that I've shown you. This is from about 2017-18. It was part of a augmented reality portrait series where I was possessed by various ghosts. This is my self-portrait, well possessed by the ghosts of Charlotte Bronte and Greer Langton, novelist Charlotte Bronte and doll making installation artist Greer Langton. So all these faces you see are based on these dolls, AI trained on dolls. I'll show you this.
Do you think I am an automaton, a machine, without feelings?
That's a very short excerpt of it, but I imagine that my newest AI portraits, some of those things I was showing at the very beginning, may end up somewhat similar to these last two projects that I've shown, in that they, they'll probably be hyper detailed, animated in some way, speaking in some way, maybe reading poetry, maybe incantations of some sort in augmented reality. Yes, I think I have this. This is like hot out of the AI oven from like this morning. Like a code generated this last night, and I grabbed it and put it in here. But this is one of my most recent AI portraits, just to sort of end this on. And again, these will probably end up being part of some augmented reality video, speaking to you, and I'm getting this crazy level of detail that I can crank up even higher. So anyway, this is where I'm sort of at, what I'm looking at. I'm excited about what I might do with these next. I hope you're also looking forward to what I do with these next. And thank you. I'm open for questions, comments, friendly conversations. I'm stopping my share.
Okay.
I think I'm back.
Can you open the chat? I had the two questions from Florian.
Sure. Let me get back to Zoom here. Finding the chat. Florian.
Yes, it's me again.
Great to see you, Florian. Do you want to read your question, or you want me to read your question?
I can ask directly. So
sure.
How do you feed that data into this software? So what is your source? So it has to come from somewhere. And what?
Sure.
What does this AI doing for you? Is this a kind of meta collage thing, or what is happening there for you?
Sure, and I'll start with the first question, which is, where does all this data come from? I'll say this, I almost always want to work with a data set that I create. Okay, a lot of AI art is created from some large data set that somebody else makes, and then when you do that, you're relying on often a large mega corporation and their biases and their limitations, right? And so, and often a way to draw attention to that is to say, okay, I'm going to create my own data set. It's going to be probably a much smaller data set, and I'm going to be very upfront about what my choices are for what goes in that data set. So for example, when I say I'm only looking at masked monsters from the most popular American horror films, that's a very small data set, right? But it's very clear about what its biases are, right?
But how do you do that? Do you take like snapshots while watching them on DVD, or?
Yep, it's pulling screenshots. It's pulling promotional photos that they give out when these movies are released, things like that. Yeah, in that particular instance, in the instance of endangered species, it's doing research on governmental websites where they catalog all these and document all these plants and animals, because of course they might disappear at some point. So you have to have good documentation of them. But yes, there's always this research collection phase that goes with these projects, if that makes sense.
So in the end, they are like files containing zeros and ones connected to a digital output, right? So pictures.
Yeah,
no additional data like the name or population or whatever.
I mean, in some of them there may be additional data, but typically the additional data is sort of, for me, it's in the selection process. Like I've chosen them based on a certain data point. Like these. I didn't show this project, but I did another project. There was another horror film project, and it was based on the top grossing and most critically acclaimed horror films. And so it's like, you made this many millions of dollars, you're in there, so it sort of gets to that sort of box office gross, measuring success via capitalism sort of data, just by the selection of it, if that makes sense.
So you would agree that it is handcrafted then by yourself?
It is. Yep. It is definitely. And this is where you get into like how autonomous is the AI. And some people, their goal is to maybe make something that is extremely autonomous. And that, I can make something that runs on its own, but it's definitely handcrafted by me. It's definitely got, it's like, if you try to think of what the relationship is between the human artist and the AI that they are working with, I think we talked a little bit about digital tools at one point. is it a tool? Is it a collaboration? Is it an extension? And this is part of when I talk about cyborgs. It's like, is this part of me? Because it was my idea that I fed into an AI. It created its own sort of ideas that were all based on mine, and then it gave them back to me. And so it's like, is this really even a separate intelligence, or is it just an extension of mine? Have I augmented my own ability to think in a way? Yeah. Great questions.
Thank you.
Thanks for presentation. And I want to ask you, what for you mean a contemporary mask? Maybe mask in Instagram, or AR mask, or maybe mask in quarantine time? Do you feel maybe something mystic in that, or?
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I was working with masks before the quarantine time, and thinking about all those things, like what purpose do they serve? Do they have a protective purpose? Do they have a transformative purpose? I can wear a mask and become something else. Do they provide a camouflage? Can I hide myself with a mask? And so there's all these different roles that masks in general have. And then of course, those are true of like physical masks, those are true of virtual masks. We can get on Zoom and hide ourselves in certain ways, and project different visuals on ourselves and things like that. And so yeah, and then when we get into when we got into the pandemic, I was like, okay, I've been working in masks in all of those ways, whether they're protective or transformative or hiding you in some way, and then just continued to work on them more because it was already, a big interest area of mine. And like a single mask can like fulfill all of those roles for somebody. I say this as somebody who's, we've talked to other artists that are like working in CNC and things like that. And I've definitely spent my time in the wood shop and in the biological lab, where you have to wear masks for, keep the sawdust out and keep the chemicals out and things like that. And so it's like mask wearing was a very natural thing for me. And so I'm constantly thinking about masks all the time. So yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yes.
I think I have the next question. I hope last, maybe.
Sure.
I want to ask you about AI and about training of AI, because what many people look at AI with distrust and with fear what in the future machine AI to replace all people. And I want to ask you, when you train your algorithm, your algorithm try to start to more clever, and do the same, maybe what you do usually, and you don't afraid about your algorithm can't to replace you as an artist?
I don't necessarily think that it could replace someone as an artist, but there is, and part of that is because the two are so intertwined with each other. The artist has to create the AI, and then the AI has to create the thing, and then often the artist has to decide whether the thing that the AI created even was art, whether that's even worth showing to anyone. And so they're so interconnected that at what point that there's a replacement, I'm not sure. But that is part of what I'm very interested in, is that there are so many images that are created that are almost meant only to be looked at by machines. If you think of your phone, you take a whole bunch of photos, and your phone as a machine is indexed all those photos before you've even looked at them, and so there's this weird element of I'm not sure a machine could replace a human artist for a human audience, but I'm actually really interested in whether a machine could create artwork for a machine audience almost. You know, that to me is like a really interesting area. Yeah, but that distrust of AI, and it's honestly like well placed. AI is very, you know, it's often based on surveillance. Whether somebody says, hey, there's this cool website Facebook, and everybody puts their pictures on it, and then Facebook takes them all and runs them through AI and figures out where you've gone and where you've been and who your friends are and everything else. So that is a good, well-placed mistrust, and that's part of why I work with it. Like I said, like when I was talking about redrawing these maps and facial recognition and maybe using something that could be used to, target a drone strike or something, and instead using it for something far better than that. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Because we always think about this in different my program with my my participant with artist, and we decide in the last conversation what maybe art creation of ideas. It's a thing what can't be delegate to AI, and maybe artistic professions. It's most in better position for the future, because it's philosophical and some creation and philosophical ideas and ideas. It's most important for the future, where only people can do it. Okay.
I think, yeah, I think I would agree with that, and I would say that I mean, we're actually like pretty far from the point where an AI could even drive a car, let alone create an interesting body of artwork for human beings. I guess, autonomously, let me put it that way. But it's definitely something that, like, as you can see, I sort of consider myself a collaborator with, or sort of a extension of my own. It's like my own little brain implant where I can go do something else and it's thinking for me in ways that I want to continue thinking. So I tell it, go think more about that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Vartan?
Yeah. I understand that Eric, it was the last performer today, and we want to say you sense that you have opportunity to participate, and a little bit describe that in that residence we want what we want to create, and with Lucy we decide to continue first residence, like create metaverse space. During the residence, I think we choose Mozilla Hubs. There are some disadvantages, maybe not good resolution and quality of image and modeling, but we found some positive sides in the fact that everyone will be able to join the space, not only through the browser, and people can join from VR helmet if they have, and to take a walk and find certain angles for interacting with our works. And especially during the restrictions, this is the great opportunity to show our projects to large number of people, because we are from other points of the world, and I hope it will be enjoyable and very interesting. And nowadays, development of metaverse, I think it's one of the step into future, and we can use these instruments to maybe artists always step by step looking in future, and in that way we can create something interesting with not maybe amazing instruments like Mozilla, but a lot of people can like can feel this immersive space, our minds, and maybe in future we can share our project in real VR app, something like that. Yes.
Thank you. I hope, I sure we create a very interesting project, and I, in one by one, artist is absent talks, I understand it's really true. We create great projects, and in the future we sharing it for the very huge number of visitors because it must be very open for all. And I thank you all for wonderful conversation today, for presentation, for introductions. And I think what we will meet in next Sunday, yes, and next Sunday with other five artists, because today we haven't opportunity to hear Marilyn, and Marilyn will introduce themselves in next time. And in 3rd February, we will present for more incredible artists. It's a duo Panacea. It's Melissa Hernandez and Byron Blanco from Guatemala, Florian Lecher from Upper Bavaria, here now, and Sarah Wood Shutivan Gupetti, if I normal pronounce, from Thailand. And Marilyn Stadler from Munich, from Upper Bavaria. And I wish you all good week and interesting ideas, and sharing your ideas in other Telegram chat. And maybe if you had the I means for people who join us with talks, if you have some ideas or some questions, please take your question to the Facebook events, and we read it and have the next talks we can to answer for some question. Thank you all, and thank you for this time spent together. I'm very excited next day and I think you too. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Have a good week. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes. See you soon.